Before we start this modded survivor profile, there's something I forgot to mention at the start of the first one that I probably should have mentioned straight away, that is going to become especially important for this one, which is basically just a reminder. XPmod does not create any visual changes in the game, so anything that you see that is different in the game is just a mod that I have installed anyway. Lewis is Ralsei from Deltarune and Rochelle is Nico from One Shot. I was just reminded that I should mention that by the fact that, well, obviously this video is on Rochelle, and so on my screen and in my footage you'll see Rochelle as Nico from One Shot. That's not part of XPmod, that's just another mod I have installed anyway. That goes for a bunch of other texture changes as well and little visual effects, although some of them will be part of the XPmod add-on, an optional workshop thing that you can turn on to get some extra visual effects in XPmod, but most people play without that anyway, so, and you don't need that to be able to play XPmod, so if you're turned off by any of these visual differences, just know that it's not part of the server. Rochelle is the second option in the character menu and is labelled as a ninja, which is of pro difficulty. Now she's an absolute blast to play, however she is also kind of notorious for being team destroying. She's the one who's particularly good at speedrunning, and it's kind of hard to hold yourself back sometimes, but genuinely it will be the best idea to just run quite a bit of the time, because Rochelle is very good at it. In terms of her passive buffs, she will have just plus 50 health and a 30% movement speed increase. There's actually a buff here that I forgot to mention, a passive buff, which I didn't actually read correctly the first time, because I assumed it was tied to a bind, but actually this is just a constant thing. I actually didn't know this. If you pick Rochelle, you also have no melee fatigue, meaning that you can shove zombies as much as you want and you will never get that forced delay before you can use another shove. Rochelle will also passively do two things to any special infected that she shoots, excluding the tank or the witch. I'm not sure if they count as special infected, but I mean, yeah, not them. They will poison them and they will also place tracking rounds in them. The poisoning will deal 25 damage every time it ticks, and it takes 5 seconds to tick. And at full level, it will tick 5 times, which means that over 25 seconds, you will deal an extra 125 damage to every single special infected that you shoot as Rochelle. As well as that, you will also place tracking rounds with them, as I said. Now, sadly, this feature will only work if you have the XPM add-on, which is available in the workshop, the Steam workshop. What it will do is, it will make it so that when you shoot a special infected, they will start to salivate and leave a trail of green goo like a spitter, which of course makes them much easier to find because the goo is so bright and it leaves a trail behind. Now, I don't really know why, but that is, or I imagine it's something like, obviously modded servers, they can't work exactly the same as downloaded mods, because with a modded server, they can't just add a new image to the game. They have to use what's already in the game. That is why, for example, we're going to get into a grappling hook ability that Rochelle has later, but it's not actually a rope that she uses a smoker tongue, which is creative, but also it has to be like that because, you know, if they couldn't make a rope and add it into the game as part of the mod for a modded server if you wanted people to be able to play on this server without having to download anything, so they use the smoker tongue texture instead. So anyway, because of that, I believe that somehow the way the game works, that you couldn't have it so that you could have this ability without you having to download something, which is why it's exclusive to that. But don't worry, I'm pretty sure this is actually the only ability in the entire mod which doesn't work without having the add-on installed, because actually most of the people I see on this server actually play without the add-on, which kind of surprised me, because I got it thinking that everyone had it. Now, every survivor specializes with some kind of weapon, and for Rochelle, it's snipers. Only Rochelle's a little bit unique. Instead of getting a flat benefit for all weapons of a certain type, she actually gets unique benefits for all the 4 different types of snipers. The Ruger Mini 14, which is the 15 bullet sniper, I think people just call it the hunting rifle, that one will get plus 65% damage and double reload speed. However, it will also have 8 less bullets in the clip, which is, you know, quite a downside. Some of this information may be slightly inaccurate. It probably won't be, but the reason I say this is because everything that I've been saying either comes from someone who knows a lot about XPmod, the literal dev of XPmod, or it comes from the menus in the game when you look at the XPM menus, which the dev says is kind of the most up-to-date thing you can look at if you want to look at what things do. However, there's also an XPmod website which is supposed to tell you what everyone does, but it isn't up to date. Now, sadly, I actually have to use the website for this one, because when you look at what the buffs are for the sniper in the game, in the menus, it just says see the website. This may be out of date, but I imagine if it was out of date, if they did update what the snipers were like since they added this, I imagine they would have just put it in the menus instead of leaving it only on the website, so I think it should be accurate. Yeah, I now have some mild confirmation from the dev that everything seems to be accurate with what I'm saying. It's been a long time since the code of it, and they might remember it wrong, but they don't think that anything that I'm about to say is inaccurate. The H&K MSG 90 sniper, which is the 30 bullet semi-automatic sniper, is probably the best choice if you're going to pick a sniper, just because already it's the best in the vanilla game, except maybe the hunting rifle from earlier. The buffs it gets are quite nice. It gets plus 40% damage, plus 30 clip size, so double the clip size, so you barely have to reload with this thing. And when you get it to full level, any infected that you shoot will just set on fire, which is a nice way to get some extra damage on top of the poison you're already doing. To be fair, these buffs aren't that crazy, but it's mostly just that this is already the best sniper in the game. The only other sniper that could have been useful was the one we just talked about, but the -8 bullets for that sniper really hurts it. I feel like it's almost more of a downside than an upside, so I almost always find myself picking this one. Into the much less effective bolt-lat action snipers, the way they tried to buff these is that if you use the AWP, you will get an extra plus 200% damage, so triple damage. However, you will only have 3 bullets in a clip. The Scout is probably the most interesting in terms of its buffs. It gets a flat plus 65% damage, but -5 bullets in a clip. But what's most interesting is that it has an ability that stacks up to 20 times that give plus 15 damage to the sniper every single time you land a headshot. So once you get 20, you will just have a flat plus 300 damage for every shot. But I still think that forcing you to use one of these bad snipers, even with those buffs, doesn't make up for it in my opinion. One last thing I maybe should have mentioned during the passive abilities thing, although for some reason I feel like it doesn't fit there, is whenever Rochelle is pounced by any kind of special infected that isn't the Charger, because I guess the Charger's too big, you have a 25% chance of just escaping it. You'll quote-unquote ninja out of it, which basically just means that you're not pounced anymore. And as well as that, when this happens, you will throw a smoke bomb automatically where you're standing that makes it harder for people to see. You will become 95% invisible and your glow will become hidden, and the special infected that pounced you will temporarily have their HUD become invisible, so it's harder for them to know what's going on. And obviously it gives you an opportunity to run away so they don't grab you again. Honestly, it's more just frustrating than anything else. Like, it's actually not that useful most of the time with Rochelle, although sometimes it can help you clutch out when you're running to the safe room and someone grabs you right at the end, but then you just ninja out and make it. It's more just frustrating for when you're zombies and it happens to you, and it probably didn't even matter that much, but like, it's still just annoying knowing that you got cheated out of your grab, but it happens.
Oh no!
Oh, okay, that's lucky. I feel bad for that hunter. Moving on to Rochelle's first ability, the dead detection device. One that I almost want to call underused, even though, to be honest, I think it's probably justified how underused it is. It may be that there's just not that many people who know this exists, because you can only really see it if you're the one using it, and you wouldn't really be able to tell if someone was using it. You have to hold the walk key and the use key at the same time to toggle it on and off. And while it's on, any infected nearby will be detected by it. It will come up with a little menu, and it will say, Boomer 50 feet away, Hunter 100 feet away, stuff like that. It seems to have quite a long range. I think it's 200 feet. It doesn't explicitly say in the menus, but I've never seen it go higher than 200 feet, so I think 200 feet would be the limit, since that's also the length of Rochelle's smoker tongue rope that we'll get to later, so it would make sense. Yeah, it can be very useful, of course, to know what's coming. If it just said there's a zombie this far away, then it probably wouldn't be that helpful, but since it tells you specifically what the zombie is, and since it's not like it can only track one at a time, you can track multiple at a time, it can be quite useful for giving you information. The reason that I don't see people use it much, I feel, is because of the fact that when you turn it on, if you try and switch weapons using the numbers, which is how I would usually do it, because the scroll wheel's a little too sensitive for me, and I would only use it if I absolutely had to like instantly do it. I can't use Q to switch to my last weapon because Q is my bind 1 key. That means I basically have to use the numbers, and if you try and switch weapons using numbers while this dead detection device is on, due to simply the way it had to be coded to be in the game, there will actually be a slight delay every single time you try to switch weapons. It's not very long, but obviously it's still an issue, especially because you're probably going to be doing it a lot, and if you're doing it, you're probably in a situation where every second counts. The reason why I say this ability is probably technically underrated is that technically, if you had the focus to just do this without having it like distract you from the game, then since there's literally no downside to having it on except this slower weapon swapping, you could just have it on all the time, and then every single time you need to switch your weapon, quickly just control E. Well, at least those would be the buttons for me. I've changed my button layout, but you could quickly just hold walk and use, and then quickly swap to a weapon and then turn it back on again after you turned it off, in theory. But obviously, in practice, you can't really do that. I mean, maybe you could teach yourself to eventually, but obviously it's not very easy. It makes things a bit difficult for what is just a small benefit. And I say a small benefit because as good as it is to know where people are, if you played Left 4 Dead for a long time, you're already very aware of what every single infected sounds like, what their spawn sounds are, what their attack sounds are, and you'll hear them and you'll just instantly be like, okay, there's a boomer, there's a charger, there's a jockey. To be fair, you won't usually know exactly how close they are because it's kind of hard to tell just based on the volume, but typically you don't really need to know how close they are. It's only sometimes helpful if there's one that has been around for ages that you can keep hearing but you don't know if it's near or not, and then you turn it on and you realize it's quite a distance away even though it's still close enough to be picked up. Rochelle also has one more ability which is kind of niche but definitely more useful, and that is the super jump. If you hold down crouch, you'll charge one up, and when you jump, you will jump 5 times higher than usual. And you may be like, wait, that sounds terrible because you're gonna land and then die to fall damage. Well, of course they thought of that. So when you do this, you are completely immune to all fall damage. Yes, that's right, completely immune. And do you know what that means? It means you can just jump off the roof in no mercy and not die and run to the safe room.
Oh no!
Yeah, this is what I said when I said like Rochelle can break teams, even though she is genuinely quite a good character. Like, it's kind of funny when you just see one of your teammates just yeet themselves off the roof and they just don't die and they just run to the safe room, and it's just like, well, guess there's just 3 of us now. I'm usually such a team player, but I'm so sick of playing No Mercy. I hate that campaign so much that every single time I end up on No Mercy, I just want to switch to Rochelle and just jump off the building and run, get that chapter over with as fast as possible. But anyway, I know this kind of brings up the issue of, doesn't this seem ridiculously stupidly overpowered? Because obviously there are more than a couple maps where taking no fall damage allows you to perform massive skips. But just to give you a bit of reassurance, even though this is something that really I should talk about more in my balance video, genuinely, I seriously believe that Rochelle is one of the most balanced characters in the game. Probably a little bit on the powerful side, but honestly, genuinely not that much. Because even though she is crazy good at speedrunning, of course, if you speedrun right from the start, you're leaving behind your entire team. And that's a lot of points to miss out on if they have to run across the entire map a person down and that gets them killed. And that means that obviously you should start speedrunning about halfway through. You should wait until they make it most of the way through the map and then speedrun. But then it's very hard to know exactly when to speedrun. And if you don't already know that you're going to run as Rochelle, if you haven't already planned it out, it's very hard to, when as soon as you get in a bad situation, just be like, oh, okay, I'm going to run now. Because usually by the time you're in that bad situation, you're going to be surrounded by commons and biled and not know where to go, and the tank has probably spawned or something. So, you know, it's very difficult to be able to say when you should start running, because usually you have to start running just before everything goes to shit. So you have to be very paying attention to, like, okay, do I think that we're about to get screwed and, like, we're never going to make it to the safe room even if we all stick together at this point? I should start running just before that point. I didn't want to get into this kind of yet, but I mean, I feel like to a lot of people, they'll just hear this and instantly think that's stupid without this context. So yeah. And of course, like everyone else, Rochelle has 2 binds, and her binds are particularly good, in my opinion. Her first bind is the reason why I said she is an absolute blast to play and maybe the best character in XP mod. I really hate to say that because I love being a team player, and Rochelle is the opposite of a team player, but like, I can't deny when a character is just a hell of a lot of fun, and that is the grappling hook. Just like, it's just one thing, but like, just really think about that. Left 4 Dead 2 maps, but now we have a grappling hook. Like, there's so much you can do. Like, you can just, all those roofs that only special infected can go on, you can just grapple up there now. And the physics, while they definitely take some getting used to, it is of course a mod, and it's a game that's not intended to be this physics-based thing, so it's a little bit janky, but it's a jank that you can get used to, and once you get used to it, it's a hell of a lot of fun to go for crazy grappling hook plays. You can jump over massive gaps you never intended to, you can skip massive parts of levels, not to mention that using the grappling hook would also cause you to die to fall damage, so it also makes it so you're immune to fall damage like the high jump, so you can also use it to jump off the No Mercy building and live and skip the whole chapter. In fact, if you're particularly good with it, you don't even have to land on the ground. You could make it to the subway, like where the car alarm is, where the safe room is, without even having to touch the ground since leaving the safe room in No Mercy, if you really could use the grappling hook. Now, there is a bit of a limit to the grappling hook. It is limited on how long you can use it. Eventually, it will break. To be exact, the limits of the grappling hook is that, first of all, it can only grapple onto something that is less than 200 feet away, assuming your max level. And second of all, over the total of that round, you cannot be using it for longer than 30 seconds spread across the entire round. And that might not sound like a very long time, but it very, very rarely will ever break on you, in my experience, in a real round, only if you like are using the hell out of it, because although yes, 30 seconds isn't that long, you only need to use the grappling hook for like half a second usually for it to pull you up to where you need to be. So that means that if you only use it for like a second or half a second every time you use it, that's like 30 to 60 uses in one round. The main reason the time restraint is there is mostly just so you can't stall forever by camping literally in the air with the grappling hook where people can't get you. I think it's mostly just to prevent people from abusing that and less to make it so that it's weaker, because as I say, if you use it normally and don't try to abuse it, then I don't think you'll ever run into a situation, well, very rarely you'll run into a situation where it will actually break in a normal game. If it's already a distance so far away you just couldn't grab it anyway, it will just not grab it. Like, if you just look at the sky and press the grappling hook, it won't grab it. Although that will happen sometimes, and you may be like, wait, what the hell's that? I thought you couldn't do that. And I believe that's just because of the ceiling, because, of course, the maps aren't modded. They can't really be modded, so, or at least not without, again, having to download new things. So because of that, they still have the same collision as if you were playing normal Left 4 Dead. And, of course, you never intended to be able to get that high in normal Left 4 Dead. So there's an invisible ceiling on every map, and if the ceiling is low enough on that map, then you can literally just look in the sky as Rochelle and grapple onto the ceiling of the map, which is it's interesting to say the least. Sadly, you will run into one or two times where, again, because you never intended to go this way, there's an invisible wall there that stops you. I think one thing that's especially frustrating is No Mercy Chapter 3 is brutal in XP mod. And it took me a few games to figure out that I actually couldn't skip the sizzle lift that spawns the horde, because I kept trying to grapple into the window so that I didn't have to use the sizzle lift, and it kept not working. And I just assumed that it has some janky physics. It's especially difficult if you're starting from a low position and trying to get to a high position. If you're just trying to make horizontal distance, it's very easy to do it. But if you're trying to get vertical distance, it's actually quite hard to use the grappling hook. And so I was thinking, I guess I'm just messing this up. I guess I'm not used to the physics and blah, blah, blah. And then I found out later there is just an invisible wall there until you start the horde. That was a bit of a downer. Although technically it's still useful there because you can start the horde and then instead of having to wait for the lift to come all the way up, you can instantly grapple up. Or even better, you can come through the side entrance because there's some windows on the side where you've already dropped in the room where you already dropped down the hole where the pills are. You can come into the room from there, which can sometimes catch some special infected off guard that might be waiting for you in the room above, and you just completely skip that room. And of course that means you can hit the button as fast as possible. I know that I'm talking a lot about this ability besides, and I'm not talking about like the other abilities, what they actually do, which is what this video is supposed to be focused on, but I mean, I really just want to hammer it into you. The grappling hook is cool. And I don't think you won't believe me, to be honest. What I will say, just to close this off though, is it can be a little bit hard to get used to how it controls, not only because of the physics, which I mentioned are janky, but jank that you can get used to, but on top of that, it didn't work how I expected. I expected when I heard there'd be a smoker-tongue grappling hook that you would just press the button, it would shoot it out, and it would pull you to wherever you shot at. But it doesn't actually work quite like that. You do get generally pulled towards that direction, but it's not like you move in a straight line from where you're standing to that direction. Essentially, while you use it, you have to hold down the jump button to slowly rise, or the crouch button to slowly fall. It means that you kind of have to get used to it, and you, instead of pressing the button and it shoots out and like that's it, you press the button to kind of toggle it on and off. So you have to press it once to shoot it out and once to let go with it. It can get a bit weird to get used to, but since it takes a long time for it to break, it very rarely will actually break on you unless you're really abusing it. Feel free to, if you're not comfortable with it, just mess around with it a bit in the safe room, or like whenever you just get a time to breathe in a map and you're just waiting for people, mess around with it a bit and see if you can get more used to the physics. Rochelle's bind 2 is a lot more useful than I realized at first. It disappointed me at first because it seemed very similar to Bill's. It just seemed to give me a katana, and I'm like, well, what's the point of that? Like, I can just pick a katana as my starting weapon. Like, I'm already doing that with all my characters that don't use pistols anyway, so why would I care about one that just gives me a katana? What this does is actually a little bit more than just give you a katana. First of all, it will make you move 50% faster while the bind is active, which is on top of the movement speed you already have, just passively as a boost. You will also attack 150% faster with melees, which is actually very useful for quickly shredding through hordes, or through a tank who is not looking and you get them from the back. That can very quickly melt a tank's health bar if they're not paying attention. It says that it gives you plus 95% stealth, which I would have to imagine means the cloaking from Bill, like the invisibility, because Rochelle is very hard to see while using this bind. And just like Bill, she will also cloak her glow from Special Infected while using this bind. So it's actually quite useful. If it was on any other character, it might be quite niche, but since it's on Rochelle, who obviously is already good at speedrunning, having this little extra speed boost that also gives you the ability to mow through any commons that would slow you down with the much faster melee speed, is actually quite nice. And I can hardly believe I forgot to mention, but one of the best uses of the bind 2 of Rochelle's is that it's actually amazing at melting tanks. Because if you pick katana, and like even if you don't pick katana because it gives you a katana, that does 600 damage per swing, which is quite a lot. And this bind will allow you to attack at more than double the usual speed, so you'll be doing a lot of damage per second if you can get close enough to melee a tank, which may sound like, oh well, you can't get close enough without getting hit, but obviously you can weave in and out, you can get them from behind, you have the increased speed as well to help you with that, you move faster than the tank so you can kind of chase them from behind. You can use that to deal a lot of damage to them really quickly. Especially the vampire tank, who takes triple damage from melees, he will just die instantly to a Rochelle's bind 2. But even the other tanks, it's very useful against them. You'll probably be seeing some clips right now of me mowing down some tanks using it because, oh boy, is that fun and satisfying.
Oh my God!
Have you heard Chris mention anything about the smoker or anything yet recently, or no?
I know he intends to buff it, but I haven't heard any news on when it's going to happen or what it's going to be.
Oh, okay.